This is Jamie Cullum. You're listening to BBC Radio 2. I've got an hour of great jazz for you, but also tonight I'm so honoured to have as my guest on the show the truly legendary Paul Simon. I cannot believe I had the chance to interview this great man. Got to ask him all sorts of questions about songwriting, about his brilliant new album. That's coming up later on the show. This is Jamie Cullum. You're listening to BBC Radio 2. I'm absolutely honoured to be joined in the studio today by Paul Simon. He's made a beautiful new album called In the Blue Light, which he's here to talk about. And just to meet you is an honour. To actually get the chance to ask you about this piece of work is a real thrill. So thank you for being here. I am a songwriter myself. I'm a musician myself, and I've actually spent a lot of time kind of walking around the architecture of your songs, trying to figure out how they tick to see what I can learn from them. But also as a jazz musician, I've spent a lot of time, interpreting other people's songs. So here you are on this album, you're interpreting some of the songs from your back catalogue. What did that feel like, going into these songs again? What did it tell you about your own songwriting?
Well, some of the songs I didn't change very much, if at all, and some, like Some Folks' Lives,
yes.
I thought the beginning of the song is good, but it doesn't really pay off. It doesn't really make its point. So I'll rewrite the ending. And I did. I had the same feeling about the song The Teacher. The ending wasn't clear enough. It was an ironic ending instead of a clear ending, and should have been rewritten so that the listener would know what I was talking about. So I rewrote those endings. I rewrote the ending of Love. I'm not sure that I improved it, but I think I improved it.
A lot of these songs that you've chosen to reinterpret on this album are more in the area of your songwriting that don't follow a traditional kind of songwriting format or a traditional kind of pop song format. And I think it's really interesting hearing your new version of Some Folks' Lives roll easy, because I mean it really felt like to me not only did you kind of rewrite part of it, but you had a feeling about it that you wanted to make it darker and jump into that kind of world of contemporary jazz. And reharmonize it in some ways and make it darker.
I have to credit Sullivan Fortner for that, the pianist. He's a young musician. He's 25 years old, or maybe 26 years old now. Comes from New Orleans. I think he studied for a little while with Ellis Marsalis, Wynton and Branford's father. He wrote the piano arrangement, which I think is just beautiful. And then I had to, rephrase it to fit in with the way he was playing it, which was a good challenge for me, and fun and interesting. Not so easy either. He made me phrase it, change melodies, but I really enjoyed it. I like that track a lot, and mostly I like it because of the players, and they were all really great players. It was Sullivan, and it was Jack DeJohnette.
Jack DeJohnette on the drums.
He's playing drums.
Wonderful.
Plays. His cymbal parts are so clean and precise, and then it was John Petitucci was playing bass, and who else was on there?
Joe
Joe
Lovano
was playing sax.
It's a beautiful band. That wow.
And it was really the first really jazz version of a song that I ever sang.
I'm going to play a little bit of it now, if I may. That was Some Folks' Lives Roll Easy from Paul Simon's new album, In the Blue Light. That was originally from originally appeared on the 1975 album, Still Crazy After All These Years. And there are so many great collaborators on this album with you. And as you mentioned, Jack DeJohnette, who's one of my favourite drummers, and Joe Lovano on that track. And also you appear with the Y Music group, which are, I guess you'd call them like a contemporary chamber orchestra?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, they're a neoclassical sextet, 3 strings, clarinet, flute, and trumpet.
So when you were deciding to, work with these different collaborators, you ask a group in like Y Music, did you have quite a specific idea of where you wanted to go with the arrangement? So I'm thinking particularly about the track Can't Run But that you did with Y Music, and that's from the Rhythm of the Saints album. And I remember hearing that in the mid-90s when I heard it in my parents' house, that song. I still think to this day there's a little bit of that kind of Philip Glass influence in that kind of cyclical kind of melody that goes on behind your vocal.
Oh, that's interesting that you hear that. Well, the original version of that was by a group called Wakti that comes from Salvador and Bahia. But they're also classically trained. The arranger also is an inventor of instruments. So they were playing on invented instruments. And it's funny that you mentioned Philip Glass, because I recorded it in Rio, and Philip was there with me, and he came to the studio, and he met them there, and he signed them to his label. So the arrangement on this new album draws its inspiration from the original line, but it goes further. It's written by a guy named Bryce Desner. He's American, lives in Paris, and he also has a rock band called The National.
The National, yeah, I love that band. Wonderful. Let's hear Can't Run But from the album In the Blue Light right now. That's Can't Run But from In the Blue Light. That rearrangement was done by Bryce Desner of The National, featuring the group Y Music. I notice, obviously, it's something you've done a lot in your career, is surround yourself with people that bring a certain sound to the table, which I'm assuming is what then inspires you to either write further or to interpret your own music in a fresh way.
Yes, that's true. In the case of Wynton, who's a very close friend, I was driving along with my son Adrian. We were in Austin, Texas, where my wife was working with her group, New Bohemians, and we were driving around in the country, hill country, and listening to his compilation of music that he listens to, and some track came on, and I said, "Oh, I like that. That's great." I said, "It sounds like it's a Louisiana band." He said, "It's Wynton." It was more like a traditional song than the jazz that you would associate with Wynton, which would be like Ellington or bop or post bop, and I said, "Oh man, I'd love to cut a track with Wynton like that's like this." I said, "But I don't know what song." And Adrian said, "Oh, Pig, Sheep, and Wolves," which I said, "Oh, great," because, I mean, few people know that song, and it's one of my favorites, but it's also one of Wynton's favorites.
Oh, wow. Well, he's got excellent taste.
Yeah, he has a good taste.
Yeah.
So he wrote a really traditional New Orleans sound arrangement for that story, which fits the story, but he can write New Orleans because that's where he grew up.
Yeah, and it's a great treatment of this song, and actually I think it brings out it's joyous, but it brings out the eerie of this song. It brings out the further darkness of this song, and although it sounds traditional, it's anything but traditional.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so good.
It's good. He's so good.
My experience with your music is that I'm 38, so I heard a lot of your music growing up in the back of my mum and dad's car. But as I got older, and you keep releasing albums. The albums that I know in my soul that I found myself are your two most recent albums, are So Beautiful, So What, and Stranger to Stranger.
It's so interesting how many of us heard music in the backseat of our parents' car.
Yeah.
That's the first time I heard Elvis Presley, was in the backseat of my parents' car.
Right. It's a hell of a place to hear it, isn't it? Because you're trapped, but the sound is good.
You're listening to sound in a strange way. And I was having a conversation with John Lennon once, and he said the way he was hearing music from is it Radio Caroline? Was that the?
That's right. Radio
He
Caroline.
said the way I was hearing it, he said it was so far away from Liverpool that it would kind of come in and out, wah wah wah. He said, and when I wrote for the Beatles, I always tried to get that sound, that like in and out, fading in and out sound that I heard from Radio Caroline. So you get to hear through other people's ears, what they like, and I would ask Wynton that stuff. And when we first became friends, he just asked me tons of questions about rock and roll, because he didn't grow up listening to rock and roll or thinking anything of it. Like, he didn't even really know, like, Chuck Berry. I said, "Oh, wow, you're missing you. I mean, this guy is, he should be like part of the Harlem Renaissance. He's so great as a storyteller. He's great. But after we went through all of that, I said, well, okay, so now my turn. So now on jazz, I think my first question was, what's going on with melody post Charlie Parker bop? I mean, where's the melody? And it was kind of interesting, his answer. He said, Charlie Parker was like a kind of a freak of nature genius. And the guy could play and hear melodies he heard them quickly and he played them fast. And the people who got influenced by him, well, they heard that he could play fast, and they play fast, but they don't play melodies. They play, scales or things like that. But that's a gift. Nobody's analyzed why a melody is great or says, "Oh, I know how. I'll just write a great melody now."
But that's where you find your words, isn't it? You find your words in the melodies, don't you? I mean, if you're songwriting,
words last.
Yes, and that's quite. Last. I mean, certainly that's unique in your field. I think
that was what Chuck Berry did.
Okay,
the sound of his words are so perfect, but also the meaning, the imagery. So you have to have patience to go through to make the sounds fit what's going on musically, and then also have something of interest to say in terms of content. Some songs can take a really long time, and then sometimes you fall into something and
patience. I'm going to tattoo that on my arm. Well, Paul Simon, thank you so much. This is a real honour for me just to ask you about music and this beautiful album you've made in the blue light. I'll be living with it for the rest of my life, so thank you very much.
Thanks,
and I know
Jamie.
people will at home. And I'm going to close. This is the song that opens the album. It's a stomping. I mean, it was always a stomping great version of this tune when you originally did it in 1973, but this new album with Nate Smith at the drums. One man's ceiling is another man's floor. Thank you so much. That was Paul Simon, and One Man's Ceiling is Another Man's Floor. And thank you so much to Paul for coming in and taking the time to talk to me. It was a true thrill just to kind of share kind of airspace with him, let alone get to ask him about music. So if you missed any of that interview or you want to hear it again, you can hear it by downloading the BBC iPlayer radio app.